Hey guys, tonight we are slipping into the armor and later, the prison rags of one of history's most famous teenagers. We are going to experience the bewildering final year of Joan of Arc, but not a saint on a stained glass window. Nope, we are diving into the messy political and, frankly, bizarre legal drama that led to her execution. Fair warning, if you were really her, you would not just be heading for a tough trial. You would be a political prisoner whose life is worth less than the ransom money. So, maybe not the best career choice. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment and let me know what city you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always cool to see where in the world we are all winding down together. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air is thick with the damp, green scent of the river meadows and the metallic tang of fear. It's May 23rd, Yalsasanliang. The sun is beginning its slow descent, casting long, distorted shadows across the field. You're on your horse, a small, dark charger that knows you're waiting your will. The leather of the reins is worn smooth under your gauntleted hands. Before you lies the city of Campion, its stone walls a promise of safety. Behind you, the noise is a chaotic symphony of shouts, the clash of steel and the panicked whinnying of horses. You've led a sortie, a daring raid out from the besieged city to harass the Burgundian camp. It's a move you've made before, a bold, confident strike to show the enemy that the city's spirit is unbroken. For a moment, it worked. Your small force of a few hundred soldiers crashed into their lines, causing confusion and disarray. There was that familiar, heady rush of righteous battle, the feeling of divine purpose flowing through you. Your standard, the one you love more than your sword, flew high, a white banner painted with God the Father and two kneeling angels. It was a symbol of hope for your men, a terror for your enemies. But the moment was fleeting. The Burgundians, allied with the English, are not so easily scattered. They regrouped, reinforced by a fresh contingent of English longbowmen. The tide turned, swiftly and brutally. The hunter became the hunted. The call for retreat was sharp, urgent. Now it's a desperate scramble back to the safety of Compion's fortifications. The bridge over the river Oise is your only path. Your men are a frantic stream of steel and sweat, pushing towards the raised gatehouse, the perk tell us that is their only salvation. You, as always, are in the position of honor and danger, the rear guard. You turn your horse, again and again rallying the last of your soldiers, a small knot of defiance against the surging tide of Burgundian troops. You are Joan the Maid, L'Opacelle. You do not run. You protect. But as you look over your shoulder, a sound cuts through the din of battle, a sound colder and more terrifying than any war cry. It's a heavy, grinding groan of wood and iron. The Perctellus, the city's main gate, is being lowered. It descends slowly at first, then with a sickening finality, it slams into the stone threshold. You're cut off, left outside. A wave of confusion washes over you, so powerful it almost knocks the breath from your lungs. Why, the bulk of your men were still outside. You were still outside. Was it panic? Did the city's governor, Guillaume de Flavois, fear that the enemy would storm the gate if he left it open a moment longer? Or was it something else? Something more calculated? Historians to this day still argue fiercely about that moment. Was the governor a traitor who deliberately locked you out, eager to be rid of a charismatic but dangerously unpredictable young woman who answered to God and not to generals? Or was he making a brutal but necessary tactical decision to save the town, sacrificing its famous protector to prevent its fall? The records are maddeningly silent on his true motives. But in this moment you don't have time for historical debate. All you know is the profound, chilling sense of abandonment. The faces of your comrades inside the gate, peering through the bars, are a mixture of horror and helplessness. The shouts of the Burgundians behind you turn from the rage of battle to the joy of triumph. An archer, a man from Picardy, loops his arm around your waist and pulls you from your horse. Your feet hit the muddy ground, and the weight of your armor, once a source of strength, now feels like an anchor pulling you down. You don't struggle much. The fight has gone out of you, replaced by a strange, hollow calm. They know who you are, of course. Your short-cropped hair, your male attire, your famous banner now lying trampled in the mud. You are unmistakable. You are the greatest prize of this long, bitter war. Not just a French soldier, but a symbol. The girl who claimed God was on the side of the Armagances, the faction of your uncrowned king, Charles VII. For the Burgundians and their English allies, capturing you is more than a military victory. It's a theological one. They haven't just captured a soldier. They believe they have captured a witch. As they surround you, their faces a mix of awe, hatred, and greed. You feel the world shrink to this one small, muddy patch of earth outside, the city that was, moments ago, your fortress. The war of swords and arrows is over for you. A new, more insidious war, a war of words and faith, is about to begin. You are no longer on the muddy field. The chaos has been replaced by a suffocating quiet. Your first prison is a tower in the castle of Beaujolais-Fontaines. It's a solid, stone reality. The world has shrunk to the size of this room, to the narrow slit of a window that shows only a sliver of an indifferent blue sky. The weight of your armor is gone, replaced by simple, rough-spun clothes, still men's clothes, a point of defiance you cling to. Days bleed into one another, marked only by the shifting light and the twice-daily arrival of a meager meal. There are no interrogations, no threats, just a heavy, watchful waiting. You are a prize, a rare and valuable object being held in safekeeping until its new owner can be determined. The man who holds the key to your cell and to your fate is named John II of Luxembourg. He is a vassal of the Duke of Burgundy, and you are technically his property, passed up the chain of command from the soldier who pulled you off your horse. You never see him, but you can feel his influence, a distant gravity shaping your future. He is a man caught between profit and pressure. On one hand, you are the most valuable captive of the entire war. Ransoming a prisoner back to their own side was standard practice, a lucrative part of medieval warfare. But you are not a standard prisoner. The English want you, and they are not interested in seeing you returned to the French army. They want you for something else entirely. The English regent in France, the Duke of Bedford, sees you not just as an enemy combatant, but as a direct threat to the legitimacy of his king's claim to the French throne. Your victories, which led to the coronation of Charles VI at Reims, were all done, you claimed, at the behest of God. If that's true, then the English are fighting against God's will. This is an intolerable narrative for them. They cannot simply execute you as a soldier. That would make you a martyr. They must discredit you. They must prove that your divine voices came not from heaven, but from hell. To do that, they need to put you on trial for heresy. And to do that, they need to own you. So the negotiations begin. A delicate, high-stakes political barter. Messengers ride back and forth between the Burgundian camp and the English headquarters. The sum they offer is staggering. 10,000 livres to know. This isn't the ransom for a common soldier, or even a knight. This is the kind of money paid for a prince or a king. The sheer size of the sum tells you everything you need to know about your own importance to their cause. You are the symbolic linchpin of the entire war. Interestingly, there is a small, almost forgotten voice of protest within your enemy's own ranks. Joan of Luxembourg's elderly aunt, a devout woman named Jean, pleads with her nephew not to sell you to the English. She visits you, sees not a witch or a warrior, but a pious young girl. She fears for your life and, more importantly to her, for your soul if you fall into the hands of an English ecclesiastical court. She even threatens to cut John out of her will. For a while he hesitates. Was it his aunt's influence, a flicker of noble conscience about selling a maiden to her death? Or was he just a shrewd businessman, playing hard to get to drive up the price? Historians still debate the nature of his delay, trying to parse whether it was born of morality or pure pragmatism. But history is rarely sentimental. In a turn of fate that seems almost convenient, the elderly aunt falls ill and dies. The last moral obstacle is removed. The deal is struck. The money is paid. The day of the transfer is cold and impersonal. You are brought out into a castle courtyard, blinking in the pale autumn light. You are no longer the property of the Burgundians. You are handed over like a parcel to a contingent of English soldiers. Their faces are hard, their language clipped and foreign to your ears. There is a palpable shift in the atmosphere. The Burgundians, while your enemies, saw you as a prize of war. These men, your new jailers, look at you differently. There is a cold fury in their eyes, a mix of fear and hatred. You are the witch who humiliated them at Orleans, the sorceress who crowned their rival. You are bound and placed in a cart. The journey begins, a slow, rattling passage through hostile territory. You are heading northwest towards the city of Rouen. Rouen is not just any city. It is the heart of English power in Normandy, their administrative and military capital in France. It is a place where you have no allies, no sympathizers, only enemies. You are no longer a prisoner of war awaiting ransom. You have been sold, and you understand with chilling clarity that you are being delivered not to a prison, but to a stage. And on that stage, a great and terrible play is about to be performed, with your life as the final act. The air in Rouen is different. It's heavy with salt from the nearby sea and thick with the smoke of 1,000 chimneys. But more than that, it's thick with hostility. The city is an anthill of English soldiers, administrators, and loyal Norman sympathizers. Every glance you receive as ye lead through the stone corridors of Bewildering Castle is laced with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. This is their territory. You are the embodiment of everything they despise. Your new home is a cell, but not just any cell. It's a room in a secular castle guarded by English soldiers, not by nuns or church guards as would be appropriate for a woman accused of religious crimes. This is your first clue that this trial will not follow the rules. Your chains are heavy, one set for your ankles, another for your wrists, all linked by a heavy central chain that is bolted to a large wooden beam in the middle of the room. You can barely move more than a few feet in any direction. 3 guards are inside the cell with you at all times, with 2 more stationed outside the door. They are rough, common soldiers who treat you not as a prisoner awaiting trial, but as a dangerous animal in a cage. Their presence is a constant, looming threat. It's in this grim setting that you first meet him, the architect of your destruction. He doesn't enter with a flourish of trumpets or a grand announcement. He arrives quietly, a man of medium height in the rich purple robes of a bishop. His name is Pierre Caution. His face is intelligent, his eyes sharp and analytical. There is no overt cruelty in his expression, but something far more chilling, a calm, unshakable certainty. He is the Bishop of Beauvais, a diocese near Compiègne, where you were captured. This gives him a sliver of jurisdictional legitimacy, because you were captured in his territory. He claims the right to prosecute you for crimes of faith, even though he is now a guest in Rouen, far from his own see. This is a legal sleight of hand, one of many to come. Caution is a man of immense ambition. He is a French cleric, but a staunch supporter of the English cause. He sees the Anglo-Burgundian alliance as the only path to peace and order in a war-torn France. He is a brilliant academic, a skilled diplomat, and a man who believes deeply in the institutional power of the Church. In his view, you are a catastrophic anomaly, a peasant girl who claims to speak directly with God, bypassing the entire ecclesiastical hierarchy, the very structure to which he has dedicated his life. You are a threat to the Church's authority. And worse, your divine mission has empowered his political enemies. Therefore, you must be a heretic. His conviction is absolute before the first question is even asked. He speaks to you in a calm, measured French. His voice is not that of a fanatic, but of a scholar, a logician. He explains the situation as if it were a simple, unfortunate matter of clerical duty. He has been commissioned by the English crown to investigate claims of heresy against you. He assures you it will be a fair and just process conducted according to the laws of the Holy Inquisition. He is here, he says, for the good of your immortal soul. He wants you to recant your errors, renounce your voices, and return to the gentle embrace of Mother Church. But, as he speaks, you sense the steel beneath the velvet. His questions are not open-ended inquiries. They are traps. He asks about your childhood, your faith, the saints you claim to hear. Every question is a probe, searching for a weakness, a contradiction, a statement that can be twisted and used against you. He is not seeking truth, he is building a case. There's a strange, almost absurd detail about Caution that history often overlooks. For all his power and intellect, he was deeply unpopular in his own diocese of Beauvais. His flock saw him as an absentee bishop, more interested in politics and currying favor with the English than in tending to their spiritual needs. This trial for him is not just about defeating a political enemy, it's a career move. A successful prosecution of such a high-profile heretic would elevate his status immensely, proving his loyalty to the English and his theological prowess to the wider church. Some historians suggest he had his eye on a bigger prize, the Archbishopric of Rouen. He warns you to be truthful, to submit to the authority of the church, his authority. He presents himself as your only path to salvation, the benevolent judge who can save you from the fire if only you would cooperate. But you look at this man, this powerful, ambitious cleric in his fine robes, and you see not a shepherd but a wolf. Your voices, the ones that have guided you from the fields of Domremy to the battlefield of Orleans, are silent about him. But your own spirit, the core of your being, recognizes him for what he is, the carefully chosen instrument of your enemies, a man who will use the law of God to achieve a very earthly political goal. You tell him you will answer truthfully to the Pope, but you are wary of the churchmen here, for they are your adversaries. It's a bold and direct challenge, and in his cold, unwavering gaze, you see that he has heard it not as a plea, but as a declaration of war. The castle of Beauvais is more than just your prison. It is the nerve center of the English occupation. Its thick stone walls, built by a French king centuries ago, now serve as enemies. From your cell, you can't see much of Rouen, but you can feel it. The city hums with a life that is both French and English, a tense cohabitation under military rule. The sounds of the city filter through your window slit, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the rumble of cart wheels on cobblestones, the calls of merchants in the marketplace, and the ever-present sound of church bells, a constant reminder of the spiritual authority now being weaponized against you. Rouen is a city of spires. Its skyline is dominated by the immense, still under construction cathedral and a host of other churches and abbeys. It's a profoundly religious city, but its clergy, like Bishop Caution, have largely thrown their lot in with the English. They are a powerful, conservative body of men who are naturally suspicious of mystics and visionaries, especially uneducated peasant girls who claim a direct line to the divine. The city itself, therefore, is a strategic choice. It's a fortress both militarily and ideologically. There is no hope of rescue here. The French armies loyal to Charles VII are far away, and the local population is either openly pro-English or too intimidated to offer any support. You are in the lion's den, and the trial is designed to be a home game for the prosecution. The logistics of the trial are meticulously planned by Caution and his English patrons. The official proceedings will take place in the castle chapel, a space that lends an air of solemn religious authority to what is, in essence, a political show trial. Later, when things get more intense, the sessions will move to a more private chamber within the castle, and even to your own cell. The geography of your confinement is shrinking, the walls closing in, both literally and figuratively. You learn that your case is causing a stir. It's not just a local affair. The English are treating it as an event of international importance. They need this trial to have the gloss of legitimacy, so they are pouring immense resources into it. The costs are being footed directly by the English crown. Records that survive to this day show detailed expense accounts for the trial, payments to the scribes, the assessors, the messengers, even for the food and wine consumed by the judges. This is an expensive production, and the English expect a specific outcome for their investment. One of the most peculiar and often overlooked aspects of your situation in Rouen is the public fascination. While the authorities are hostile, the common people, the French citizens of Rouen, are a mixture of fearful, hostile, and deeply curious. You are a bogeyman to some, the witch who bewitched their rightful English king out of his French inheritance. To others, you are a spectacle. When you are occasionally moved from one part of the castle to another, crowds gather, straining for a glimpse of the famous maid. They see a small young woman in boy's clothes surrounded by a phalanx of grim-faced soldiers. What they think is impossible to know, but their silent, staring presence adds another layer of pressure to your already immense burden. You are acutely aware of the home field advantage. The judges are all from Norman or Parisian clergy, men whose careers and safety depend on English goodwill. The language of the court will be French, your native tongue, but the legal concepts and theological arguments will be couched in a Latinate, academic jargon designed to confuse and trap you. The scribes who record the proceedings are employed by the court. Every word you say will be filtered through their pens, recorded for a record that is being built not to find truth, but to justify a predetermined verdict. Historians still debate the extent of direct English interference in the trial's day-to-day proceedings. Caution always maintained that it was a purely ecclesiastical affair, conducted independently of secular powers. However, the evidence is overwhelming. The trial was funded by the English, held in an English military stronghold. Your guards were English soldiers, and the English regent, the Duke of Bedford, was a constant, looming presence behind the scenes. It's like a sports team owner claiming he has no influence over the referee's calls, while also paying the referee's salary and hosting the game in his own private stadium. The idea of an impartial trial under these circumstances is a farce. You sit on the hard cot in your cell, listening to the muffled sounds of the city, and you understand the geography of your doom. You are not just in a prison, you are in a carefully constructed theater of justice. Every element, the city, the castle, the chapel, the gods, has been chosen to isolate you, intimidate you, and ensure that the story ends the way your captors have already written it. The trial has even begun, but the verdict is already in the very stones of ruin. The days leading up to the first public session are not quiet. Your world, though confined to a single room, becomes a revolving door of unfamiliar faces. These are the men who will be your judges and jurors. Bishop Caution may be the lead prosecutor and chief judge, but he knows he cannot be seen to act alone. To give his predetermined verdict the sheen of broad ecclesiastical consensus, he has assembled a legal and theological dream team, or perhaps more accurately, a nightmare team from your perspective. They come to your cell in small groups, a parade of clerks, canons, abbots, and doctors of theology. In total, over 100 men will be involved in the trial in some capacity, serving as assessors, part jurist, part advisor. They are the intellectual elite of Norman and Parisian clerical society, the sharpest minds the pro-English faction can muster. They observe you. Their faces a mixture of academic curiosity and pious disapproval. They are here to assess you, but it feels more like a scientific evaluation of a strange new specimen. They ask preliminary questions, testing the waters. They ask your name, your age, where you are from. Simple questions, but their pens are already poised, ready to note any slip, any hesitation. They are building a psychological profile, looking for chinks in your armor of faith. The sheer number of them is a tactic in itself. It's meant to overwhelm you. A lone, uneducated girl against the full weight of the University of Paris and the Norman clergy. You have no lawyer, no advisor, no one to help you navigate the labyrinthine complexities of a heresy trial. You are entirely on your own, facing a legion of experts whose entire professional lives have been spent debating the very theological points they will use to destroy you. Among this sea of hostile faces, there is one man who stands out, a Dominican friar named Jean Lemaitre. He is the Vice Inquisitor of France. His presence is technically required for a major heresy trial, but he is visibly uncomfortable. You can sense his reluctance. Unlike Caution, who is driven by political ambition, Lemaitre seems to be a man caught in a machine he cannot control. He participates, but often half-heartedly. The trial records show him trying to recuse himself at one point, claiming the trial is outside his jurisdiction and more a matter of politics than faith. Caution, backed by the English, pressures him to remain. This subtle, internal conflict is a fascinating footnote to the proceedings. Historians often wonder what would have happened if Lemaitre had stood his ground. Would it have delegitimized the trial? Probably not. The English would have found someone else. But his reluctance is a small crack in the monolithic facade of the prosecution. The chief prosecutor, the man who will do most of the direct questioning under Caution's supervision, is a canon named Jean d'Estivet. If Caution is the cold, calculating architect, d'Estivet is the attack dog. He is a man of coarse temperament and fiery zeal. He has a personal animosity towards you that goes beyond professional duty. He calls you names, taunts you, and is responsible for some of the most aggressive and insulting lines of questioning. He is the one who will later be tasked with creating the final list of charges against you, a document that will be a masterwork of misrepresentation and twisted logic. He is, in short, the perfect man for a dirty job. So, the stage is set, and the cast is assembled. It's a stunningly lopsided affair. On one side, a team of over 100 of the best educated legal and theological minds in France, backed by the full financial and military power of the English crown. On the other side, there is you, a 19-year-old girl who cannot read or write, with no legal training, whose only advisors are the celestial voices in your head. The absurdity of the situation is almost laughable. It's like setting up a chess match between a grandmaster and someone who has never seen a chessboard, and then calling it a fair contest. As you sit in your chains watching these learned men come and go, you might feel a flicker of doubt, a wave of pure human fear. How can you possibly stand against this? But then you remember your mission, your saints. You have faced down English longbowmen and Burgundian knights. These men, with their books and their robes, are just another kind of army. The battlefield has changed from the fields of Partey to a courtroom in ruin, but the war for you remains the same. It is a war for the soul of France, and a war for your own soul. You take a deep breath. Let them come. The psychological warfare begins long before you set foot in the courtroom. Caution and his team understand that a confession is far more powerful than a simple conviction. If they can make you admit that your voices were demonic and your mission a fraud, their victory will be absolute. To achieve this, they don't rely solely on theological debate. They resort to espionage. Your cell, that small, cold room in the castle tower, becomes a theater of deception. They know you are devout, that you long for the comfort of the sacraments, especially confession. Stivet, the aggressive prosecutor, devises a plan. He arranges for a man named Nicolas Loisel, a canon from Rouen and one of the assessors, to be placed in your cell disguised as a fellow prisoner. He is from your home region of Lorraine, or so he claims, and he feigns sympathy for your cause and for King Charles. Loisel is a master of manipulation. He speaks to you in the familiar accent of your childhood, sharing false stories of his own capture and his loyalty to the French crown. He builds a rapport, earning your trust in this lonely, hostile environment. He tells you that he is a priest and offers to hear your confessions secretly. This is a profound temptation, the chance to unburden your soul, to feel the grace of a sacrament you've been denied, is almost overwhelming. Behind a specially constructed hole in the wall, covered by a curtain, sit Caution, Stivet, and a handful of notaries, their pens ready. They are straining to overhear every word, hoping you will confess to something, anything that they can use. Will you admit your doubts? Will you reveal the sign you gave the king? Will you say something that can be twisted into an admission of witchcraft or heresy? The entire setup is a cynical violation of one of the most sacred tenets of the Church, the sanctity of the confessional seal. It is utterly sacrilegious, a fact that highlights the depths to which they are willing to sink. You speak to Loisel. You talk about your faith, your mission, and your voices, but you are cautious, whether through divine guidance, as your supporters would later claim, or through a shrewd, innate intuition. You seem to sense the trap. You say nothing incriminating. You speak of your trust in God, your loyalty to your king, and your belief in your saints. The men behind the wall are left frustrated. With nothing more than the same testimony you are willing to give in open court. This bizarre episode of espionage is a well-documented part of the trial records, confirmed during your later retrial by the notaries who were forced to participate. It is a stunning example of the moral bankruptcy of the prosecution. They are using the very rituals of the faith they claim to be defending as tools for entrapment. The spying doesn't stop there. The English guards in your cell are also encouraged to report on your behavior. They are not just jailers, they are informants. They watch you pray. They listen to you muttering to yourself, hoping to catch the names of your demons. They report that you are calm, devout, and surprisingly resilient. They note your insistence on wearing men's clothing, a detail that becomes increasingly important to the prosecution. There's a strange, almost pathetic Cold War fact about this whole surveillance operation. Caution and his team were so convinced you were, which that they expected you to perform magic in your cell. They were likely disappointed. There were no incantations, no strange rituals, only the quiet, fervent prayers of a young woman. The reality of your simple piety was probably more confusing to them than any sorcery would have been. This period of intense, covert observation is designed to unnerve you, to make you feel that you are never truly alone, that every wall has ears. It's an attempt to break you down before the formal trial even begins. They want you to enter that courtroom feeling isolated, paranoid, and exhausted. They want you to believe that resistance is futile, because they already know all your secrets. But the plan backfires. Instead of breaking you, it seems to strengthen your resolve. You become even more guarded, more reliant on your inner spiritual resources. You learn that you cannot trust anyone, that the entire world of men around you is a web of deceit. The only counsel you can rely on, you believe, is the counsel of Saint Catherine and Saint Margaret. The spies in your cell fail to extract a confession, but they succeed in severing your last ties of trust to the earthly church represented by your accusers. They force you to retreat into the fortress of your own faith, a place where they, with all their legal and theological might, cannot follow. The failed espionage attempt is a small victory for you, a sign that even in chains, you are not entirely powerless. February 21st, 1431. The day has come. You are lead from your cell, the clanking of your chains echoing in the stone passageways. The air is cold, and you can see your breath in front of you. You walk into the royal chapel of the castle of ruin, and for a moment, the sheer spectacle of it is enough to take your breath away. The room is cavernous with a high, vaulted ceiling and light filtering through stained glass windows. But the space is completely filled with people, and all of them are staring at you. There are at least 40 men seated in tiered rows, a sea of dark robes and stern, unwelcoming faces. At the head of the assembly, seated in a high-backed chair like a throne, is Bishop Pierre Cauchon. To his side sits the reluctant Vice-Inquisitor, Jean Lemaitre. Arranged before them are the assessors, the doctors of theology, the learned abbots, the sharp-eyed canon lawyers. These are the men who have been observing you, the dream team assembled to ensure your conviction. Scribes are seated at tables, their quills sharpened, ready to document every word. English soldiers, armed with pikes and swords, line the walls, a stark reminder of who is truly in charge. There is no jury of your peers. There is no defense counsel. There is only you, a single wooden stool placed in the center of the room, and this overwhelming assembly of your accusers. The weight of their collective gaze is a physical force. They are here to judge you, and their expressions make it clear they have judged you already. You see condescension, academic arrogance, and a chillingly impersonal piety. They see not a person but a problem to be solved, a theological knot to be untangled and then discarded. Caution begins the proceedings. His voice is calm and authoritative, filling the chapel. He delivers a long opening sermon, a formal speech in which he lays out the supposed purpose of this gathering. He speaks of the rumors that have spread throughout Christendom concerning you, rumors of deeds and sayings that appear to be contrary to the Orthodox faith. He emphasizes that the court is assembled not out of hatred, but out of a pure and charitable zeal for the truth and for the salvation of your soul. It's a masterful piece of rhetoric, framing a political assassination as an act of spiritual mercy. You listen to this, standing in your chains, and the injustice of it is a fire in your gut. These men in their warm robes speak of charity while keeping you in brutal, illegal conditions, guarded by hostile soldiers in a secular prison. They speak of truth while employing spies and planning entrapment. After the sermon, Cauchon demands that you swear an oath. This is the first official act of the trial, and it is your first test. He wants you to place your hands on the Holy Gospels and swear to answer truthfully to any and all questions put to you. It seems simple enough, a standard courtroom procedure. But you hesitate. Your hesitation sends a murmur through the room. They see it as defiance, as a sign of guilt. But for you, it's a matter of profound importance. You are willing to swear to tell the truth about your personal history, your family, your life before your mission. But you will not swear to reveal everything about your divine revelations. Specifically, you are terrified they will ask you about the sign you gave to Charles at Chinon to convince him of your divine mission. You believe this was a private matter between you, your king, and God. To reveal it to your enemies would be a betrayal. You tell them this, your voice clear and steady, though your heart is pounding. I do not know what you wish to ask me. You might ask me things that I would not tell you. This response throws the court into a state of agitation. Diaz, the prosecutor, leaps to his feet, his face red with anger. He insists that you must take the oath without conditions. The assessors mutter amongst themselves. This is not going according to script. They expected a timid, perhaps tearful, peasant girl. Instead, they are faced with a young woman who is already setting the terms of her own interrogation. Here we see one of the most remarkable aspects of your trial. Your incredible natural intelligence and wit. You are uneducated, unable to read or write, yet you possess a sharp, logical mind and a talent for evading verbal traps. This exchange over the oath is the first example. You are not refusing to swear. You are making a subtle but crucial distinction. This infuriates the legalistic minds of your accusers. They operate in a world of absolute rules and procedures. Your nuanced, conditional obedience is something they cannot easily handle. A lesser-known fact about this first session is the sheer chaos of it. The official transcript presents a formal, orderly proceeding, but accounts from the later retrial paint a different picture. The assessors were not a silent, respectful audience. They would often shout out questions simultaneously, interrupting each other undue. It was a cacophony, a verbal mobbing. The scribes complained that they couldn't keep up, that it was impossible to record everything accurately in the din. Caution frequently had to bang his gavel and call for order. Finally, after much back and forth, a compromise is reached. You agree to swear to tell the truth about matters concerning the faith, but reserve the right to remain silent about your private revelations. It's a small victory, but a significant one. You have walked into their arena, surrounded and outnumbered, and in the very first exchange, you have refused to play entirely by their rules. You have shown them that you will not be a passive victim. You will be an active participant in your own trial. As the session ends and you are laid back to your cell, a new feeling settles over you. The fear is still there, but now it is mingled with a spark of defiance. The battle has been joined. The battle over the oath is not just a one-time skirmish. It becomes a recurring theme of the trial's early days. Each morning, you are brought into the chapel, and each morning, the proceedings begin with caution demanding that you swear the full, unconditional oath. And each morning, you give them the same carefully worded refusal. I have sworn enough, you tell them, your patience wearing thin. This repetitive struggle is more than just procedural stubbornness. It's a fundamental clash of worldviews. For your judges, the oath is the bedrock of the entire legal process. In their minds, a refusal to submit to the oath is paramount to a refusal to submit to the authority of the church itself. It is an act of pride and rebellion. They cannot comprehend why you would withhold anything if your mission is truly from God. What could you possibly have to hide? To them, your secrecy is immediate proof of guilt. They argue, cajole, and threaten. A person is not required to confess to those who are not their proper confessor, he argues. But in a trial of faith, everyone, even a prince, is required to swear to tell the truth, and to conceal nothing. For you, however, the oath represents a different kind of betrayal. Your voices, your saints, have given you instructions. Some of these, you believe, are for you alone. Others are for your king. To reveal them to this hostile court would be to disobey God. So you are caught in an impossible bind. To obey the court is to disobey heaven, and to obey heaven is to defy the court. Faced with this choice, you never waver. Your loyalty is to the source of your mission. This is where you start to lay your own brilliant, albeit unintentional, legal traps. When they press you on the oath, you deflect with astonishing cleverness. You say, I will willingly swear to tell the truth about what I know concerning this trial, but not all that I know. You are creating a distinction between the trial's business and your business. At one point, you even turn the tables on them with a flash of wit. When they demand you swear to reveal all, you retort, perhaps you will ask me about things which, if I told you, you would have me put to death. The raw, unvarnished truth of that statement hangs in the air, a stunning indictment of their supposed charitable intentions. The scribes diligently record these exchanges, and in doing so they inadvertently create a record of your intelligence. The men in that room thought they were documenting the ramblings of a heretic. Instead, they were preserving the voice of a young woman thinking on her feet, parrying the thrusts of the finest legal minds in the country. A lesser-known detail from the transcripts is how often Caution had to intervene to protect his prosecutors from your sharp answers. You had a way of making their carefully constructed questions sound foolish or malicious. You answer one long, convoluted question about whether you believe you are in a state of grace by saying, "If I am not, may God put me there, and if I am, may God so keep me." This answer was so theologically perfect that it stunned the court into silence. A famous theologian present was heard to mutter, "This is a great answer." He was promptly told to shut up by Caution. The argument over the oath is a microcosm of the entire trial. It's a dialogue of the deaf. They are speaking the language of canon law, of earthly hierarchy and institutional procedure. You are speaking the language of personal mystical experience. There is no common ground. The historical debate here is fascinating. Were you being deliberately clever, employing a conscious legal strategy? Or was this simply the product of a pure, unshakable faith and a very literal mind? Most historians believe it was a combination of both. A brilliant natural intuition sharpened by the certainty of your divine mandate. You weren't trying to be a lawyer, you were just trying to be a faithful servant to your voices, and in doing so, you ran rings around them. Eventually, Caution realizes he is losing this battle of wills and, more importantly, wasting time. He can't break you on the oath. He makes a procedural decision to move on, noting for the record your contumacy, a formal term for disobedience to a court's order. This refusal will be entered as evidence against you. He has what he needs. In his view, you have already proven your heresy by placing your private revelations above the authority of the church militant. The trap of the oath, even though you never fully stepped into it, has served its purpose. It has established a pattern of defiance that he will use to build his case brick by brick. The foundation of your conviction has been laid, not with evidence of witchcraft or devil worship, but with your simple, stubborn refusal to swear away your secrets. Having failed to break you on the procedural issue of the oath, Caution and his prosecutors moved to the heart of the matter, your voices. For the next several days, the interrogation focuses relentlessly on this single topic. They want to know everything. When did you first hear them? What did they say? What did they look like? Were they naked? The questions are repetitive, obsessive, and often deeply strange, veering from the theological to the absurd. You describe your first experience at the age of 13 in your father's garden in Domremy. A bright light, and a voice telling you to be a good girl and go to church often. You identify the voices over time as belonging to Saint Michael the Archangel, Saint Catherine of Alexandria, and Saint Margaret of Antioch. These were popular and highly venerated saints at the time, but for your judges, this is not a sign of piety. It's an opportunity. They are experts in hagiography, the study of saints' lives. They will now try to catch you in a theological or historical error about the very saints you claim to speak with. The questions become a dizzying barrage of minutiae. How were the saints dressed? Did they have hair? Did they speak French or English? Did they smell nice? You answer with a simple, sometimes childlike sincerity. Yes, they were beautifully dressed. Yes, they had hair. They spoke excellent French. Why would they speak English? You retort, they are not on the English side. This flash of patriotic wit, once again, momentarily silences them. They press you on the physical nature of your visions. You tell them you have seen them with your own bodily eyes, touched them, embraced them. This is a critical point for the prosecution. In the sophisticated theology of the 15th century, true divine visions were considered to be purely spiritual, perceived by the soul, not the physical senses. To claim you physically touched an angel or a saint was, in their view, a sign of either demonic illusion or a gross, uneducated delusion. They are trying to force you into a theological box where your visions can be dismissed as a product of either madness or demonic trickery. You described Saint Michael appearing as a true Prodom, a noble and worthy man. They seize on this. What does that mean? How can an incorporeal angel appear as a man? You, with no theological training, are wading into deep and dangerous waters, but your answers remain grounded in your own experience. I saw them with the eyes of my body, as well as I see you tell your interrogators. And when they went away from me, I would weep, and I wished that they would have taken me with them. The raw, emotional honesty of this statement is powerful, but to the cold logicians of the court, it is just more evidence of a carnal, and therefore suspect, form of spirituality. One of the more bizarre and little-known lines of questioning concerned the light that accompanied the voices. They ask you endlessly about this light. Did the light come from the side? Was there a voice from the light? Or did the voice come from the figure in the light? It's a level of pedantic detail that feels almost insane. They are trying to find an inconsistency. Any small detail you might change from one day to the next, which they can then use to prove you are making it all up. But your story remains remarkably consistent throughout the grueling, multi-day interrogation. The academic debate on the nature of your voices continues to this day. Were they the product of genuine mystical experience? Were they a symptom of a neurological or psychological condition like epilepsy or schizophrenia, as some modern medical analysts have hypothesized? Or were you a simple but intensely imaginative girl, externalizing your own powerful convictions into the form of saints? The historical record, filtered as it is through the hostile lens of the trial transcript, cannot give us a definitive answer. What is clear, however, in the transcript is your unwavering belief in their reality. The interrogation is exhausting. Day after day, you are made to stand before them and recount the most intimate, spiritual moments of your life, only to have them picked apart, ridiculed, and categorized as demonic. They try to twist your words. When you say the saints promised you would go to paradise, they frame it as the sin of presumption, of claiming to know God's will. When you say you were commanded to lead the army, they frame it as an unholy subversion of the natural order. Through it all, you remain steadfast. You refuse to deny the voices. You tell them the voice told me to answer you boldly. And that is exactly what you do. You are often tired, sometimes frustrated, but you never break. You parry their questions, sometimes with simple faith, sometimes with sharp wit, and sometimes by simply refusing to answer what you consider to be an irrelevant or improper question. You tell them on this, I will not answer you today. I do not have permission. By placing the permission of your voices above the demands of the court, you are, in their eyes, condemning yourself with every word, but in your own mind, you are simply being obedient. After days spent dissecting your spiritual experiences, the court turns its attention to a subject of intense political and practical curiosity, the king's secret. They know that when you first arrived at the court of the Dauphin Charles at China 2 years earlier, you were an unknown quantity. He was skeptical, his court was full of doubters. To win him over, you held a private audience with him. After that meeting, Charles emerged a changed man, convinced of your divine mission and ready to give you an army. The judges in ruin are desperate to know what happened in that room. What did you say to him? What sign did you give him? This question is more than just idle curiosity. It's a political bombshell. The English and their Burgundian allies had long spread rumors that Charles VI was illegitimate, the product of an adulterous affair by his mother, Isabel of Bavaria. If they could prove that the sign you gave him was some form of witchcraft or demonic trick, they could delegitimize his entire reign. They could argue that the King of France was not only a bastard but also in league with a heretic, a follower of Satan. The stakes are incredibly high. Caution and DSD circle this topic like sharks. What sign did you give your king? They demand, over and over. Was it a crown, an angel, an object? They are fishing, hoping for any detail they can't twist. You refuse, adamantly. This, for you, is the ultimate secret, a sacred trust between you, your king, and God. I will not tell you, you state flatly. Go and ask him yourselves. This is an act of incredible loyalty and courage. You are protecting the man who, at this very moment, is making no effort whatsoever to save you. King Charles VII, safely crowned and consolidating his power, has remained silent. No ransom has been offered, no rescue attempt mounted, no diplomatic pressure applied. He has, for all practical purposes, abandoned you. Yet, you protect his secret with your life. Your refusal drives the court to distraction. They threaten you with torture. They tell you that your silence is proof of your guilt. You respond with one of your most famous and poignant lines. Even if you were to tear my limbs from me and doctor my soul from my body, I would not tell you anything more. Frustrated, they try a different tack. They ask about a story that has become a popular rumor, that an angel brought a physical, golden crown from heaven and placed it upon Charles's head in your presence. This was a fanciful tale that had spread among the common people, a piece of folklore. They asked you if it's true, hoping to trap you into either confirming a lie or getting tangled in a complicated denial. Here, you demonstrate your cleverness once again. You don't give a simple yes or no. Instead, you answer allegorically. You speak of a symbolic crown, the crown of France, and how you were the instrument that enabled Charles to go to Reims and receive his true coronation. You tell them the sign was the great hope that I brought him, and the good I would do for him. You take their literal, baiting question and elevate it into a metaphor for your entire mission. It's a brilliant pivot, but it doesn't satisfy them. The mystery of the king's secret has intrigued historians for centuries, and it remains one of the great what-ifs of your story. What really happened at China? The most widely accepted theory, based on later accounts, is that you reassured Charles of his own legitimacy. In that private meeting, you are thought to have told him the content of a secret prayer he had made to God in his private chapel just days before, a prayer in which he asked for a sign as to whether he was the true heir to the throne. By revealing that you knew the content of this intensely personal, unspoken prayer, you proved to him that your knowledge must have come from God. It was a sign that was both deeply personal and politically explosive. If this theory is true, your refusal to reveal it in court was not just loyalty, it was a strategically vital act of political protection. Revealing it would have publicly exposed the king's deepest insecurity. Back in the courtroom, your continued silence on this point is a major blow to the prosecution's political agenda, but it provides them with more fuel for their religious case. They add it to the growing list of your transgressions. Refusal to reveal a secret sign, which is therefore suspected to be of a nefarious and magical nature, will be one of the charges. Your loyalty is being twisted into another proof of your heresy. By protecting your king, you are condemning yourself. The public sessions of the trial have not gone the way Goshen planned. Far from presenting the image of a confused, demonic heretic, you have appeared surprisingly composed, witty, and steadfast. Your sharp answers have, on several occasions, embarrassed your learned interrogators. The crowds that gather to watch you being led to the chapel are growing, and the dynamic is shifting. What was meant to be a straightforward condemnation is turning into a public spectacle with an unpredictable protagonist. You are winning the battle for public perception, even within the hostile confines of ruin. Caution, the shrewd strategist, recognizes this. He sees that your public performance is becoming a liability for the prosecution. He can't risk you continuing to outsmart his prosecutors in front of an audience. So he makes a crucial decision. The public trial is over. On March 10th, after about half a dozen public sessions, he announces that the remainder of the interrogations will be conducted in private. The official reason given is that the public proceedings are too tumultuous and that a more serene environment is needed for such a grave matter. Another reason cited is to spare you, the prisoner, the fatigue of the public ordeal, a transparently false gesture of concern. The real reason, of course, is control. By moving the trial from the grand chapel to a small, private chamber within the castle, Caution can manage the process much more tightly. The number of assessors will be drastically reduced, limited to a select group of his most trusted and hardline supporters. There will be no more spontaneous, shouted questions from the floor. No more risk of a sympathetic murmur from an observer. No more grandstanding from you in a space that gives you a strange kind of power. And so, the world shrinks again. You are no longer led through the courtyard to the chapel. Instead, you are taken to a drab, unremarkable room near your cell. The soaring, vaulted ceilings are gone, replaced by a low, oppressive stone roof. The light from the single, barred window is weak. The only people in the room are Caution, the Vice Inquisitor Lemater, a handful of chosen assessors like the fiery D'Estivet and the treacherous Lois, Leur, and the two notaries. The atmosphere is immediately more intense, more claustrophobic. The pretense of a public inquiry has been stripped away, leaving the raw reality of an inquisition. The interrogations in this new setting become even more grueling. Without the minimal restraint of a public audience, your questioners become more aggressive. They circle back to the same topics: your voices, your sign to the king, your refusal to submit to the church, badgering you for hours on end. The pace is relentless. They are trying to wear you down through sheer exhaustion. It is in these private sessions that some of the most famous and intimate exchanges of the trial occur. They ask you if St. Margaret and St. Catherine hate the English. You reply, they love what God loves and hate what God hates. It's another one of your perfectly evasive, theologically sound answers. They ask why your standard was carried at the coronation in Reims, more so than those of other captains. You answer it had been in the struggle. It was only right that it should be at the honor. The simple, profound logic of it is unassailable. One of the more obscure but revealing facts about this phase of the trial is the role of the notaries, the men tasked with writing everything down. We know their names: Guillaume Colson, Guillaume Manchon. These were not high-ranking clerics, but professional scribes. In the retrial 25 years later, they testified that they were under immense pressure from Caution and d'Estivet to alter the record. They were sometimes told not to write down your more clever answers or your protests against the court's conduct. To their incredible credit, and at great personal risk, they largely refused. Manjon, the chief notary, would secretly make his own private notes on the side and would later consult with Coles to ensure the official transcript was as accurate as possible. They knew they were documenting something of immense historical importance, and they felt a professional duty to get it right. These two obscure scribes and their quiet, passive-aggressive resistance became the unlikely guardians of your legacy. Without their conscientious work, our understanding of the trial would be completely shaped by the propaganda of your accusers. The shift from public to private is a turning point. It marks the moment the trial sheds its last pretense of fairness. You are now truly alone, trapped in a small room with a handful of men who have already decided your fate. The questions are a blur, the days blend into one another. They are no longer trying to convince an audience. They are simply gathering the specific evidence they need to write up the articles of indictment. The trial has become a bureaucratic exercise in conviction, and in the dim light of that small castle chamber, they are about to unveil the weapon they believe will be your final undoing. In the suffocating intimacy of the private interrogations, your accusers finally zero in on what they believe is your most blatant and indefensible crime. It's not the voices in your head which are invisible and ultimately a matter of faith. It's not your secret sign to the king which you refuse to reveal. It's something tangible, something everyone can see, something you are wearing at this very moment: your clothes. Your insistence on wearing male attire, a tunic, hose, and short-cropped hair, becomes the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. To a modern mind, this might seem absurd, a trivial matter of fashion. But in the 15th century, it was a profound transgression with deep theological implications. For Caution and his team, your clothing is the perfect weapon. It is visible, undeniable, and in their interpretation, a clear violation of divine law. They pull out their key piece of textual evidence, a single line from the Book of Deuteronomy in the Old Testament: "A woman shall not wear a man's garment, nor shall a man put on a woman's cloak. For whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord your God." For the court, this is an open and shut case. The Bible itself forbids cross-dressing. By wearing men's clothes, you are committing an abomination. It is in their eyes an outward sign of your inner perversion, a rejection of the natural order established by God. The prosecutor, d'Estivet, hammers this point relentlessly. He calls your clothing dissolute, monstrous, and an offense against divine majesty. The assessors chime in, quoting various church fathers and legal scholars who had condemned the practice. They are building an airtight legal and theological case around your wardrobe. It allows them to pivot from the murky, unprovable territory of your visions to a concrete, observable act of defiance. They argue that your male attire is a symbol of your heresy for several reasons. First, it is an act of pride, an arrogant refusal to accept the station and gender God assigned to you. Second, they claim it is scandalous and designed to tempt the men around you, a bizarre and twisted piece of victim-blaming logic. Third, and most importantly, they link it directly to witchcraft. In the medieval imagination, witches and sorcerers often engaged in acts that inverted the natural order, saying the Lord's Prayer backward, desecrating holy objects, and yes, blurring the lines between genders. Your clothes, therefore, are presented as part of a classic demonic pattern. This focus on your clothing is a masterstroke of prosecutorial strategy. It's an issue on which they believe you cannot possibly win. If you claim your voices told you to wear them, then they can say the voices are demonic because they commanded you to violate Scripture. If you say it was your own idea, then you are guilty of pride and blasphemy. You are trapped. A little known but fascinating aspect of this debate is that the Church's own rules on this matter were not as rigid as the court pretended. There was a well-established principle in canon law attributed to St. Thomas Aquinas that such rules could be set aside in cases of necessity. For example, if a woman needed to disguise herself to escape a dangerous situation, wearing men's clothes was permissible. The context mattered, but Caution and his court deliberately ignore this nuance. They treat the line from Deuteronomy as an absolute, universal law with no exceptions, ripping it from its historical and theological context to serve their purpose. This selected use of Scripture is a hallmark of the entire trial. You are, of course, completely unaware of these fine points of canon law. You are not a theologian. You just know why you wear these clothes. So, when they bombard you with these accusations, with talk of abominations and monstrosities, you are left to defend yourself not with complex legal arguments, but with simple, practical truth. The great theological debate over your soul has come down to a fight about your pants. And as you sit there surrounded by these furious robed men, you prepare to give them an answer they are completely unprepared to hear. Faced with a theological onslaught over the abomination of your clothing, you don't respond with a complex doctrinal argument. You have no such argument to give. Instead, you offer them the simple, unvarnished truth, grounded in the harsh reality of your life as a soldier and a prisoner. Your defense of your trousers is not about theology, it's about safety. It is more fitting and proper to have this attire, since I am a man's work. You tell them a statement that likely confuses their academic minds. You clarify. You are surrounded by men constantly. First, it was in the rough, chaotic environment of a military camp. Now, it is in a cell where you are perpetually guarded by coarse English soldiers. You state that wearing a tunic and hose, securely fastened together, offers you a measure of protection against assault that a simple dress would not. This is a stunning moment. You are a 19-year-old girl speaking to a room full of powerful, celibate clerics, and you are calmly explaining the practicalities of fending off sexual violence. You are forcing them to confront the grim reality of your prison conditions, a reality they have been complicit in creating. By holding your trial in a secular castle and assigning you male enemy guards, Caution himself has created the very necessity that, according to their own canon law, would justify your attire. It is a moment of breathtaking hypocrisy on the part of the court, and you are, perhaps unknowingly, pointing it right at them. The judges are taken aback. This is not the answer they expected. They were prepared for a theological debate about God's law and gender roles. They are not prepared for a practical discussion about the threat of rape. They try to brush it aside. Caution promises you that if you agree to wear a dress, you will be moved to an ecclesiastical prison and be guarded by women, by nuns. I will be put in your prison, he says, and I shall have women to guard me. You are immediately skeptical. Give me a woman's dress, and I will take it and go, you reply, as soon as it pleases you that I should go from here. You are calling his bluff. You will wear a dress, but only if they fulfill their end of the bargain first. You will not give up your only means of defense on the mere promise of better treatment from men who have shown you nothing but bad faith from the very beginning. Your trust in them is, quite rightly, Zaro. This exchange reveals a key aspect of your character that is often lost in the hagiography, your profound pragmatism. While your mission was divinely inspired, your execution of it was oft ungrounded in common sense. You wore men's clothes for the same reason you wore armor in battle. It was the appropriate and necessary equipment for the job. You were not trying to be a man, you were trying to be a soldier, and then a survivor. There's a curious and often overlooked detail concerning your clothing. You didn't just wear any men's clothes. You wore a specific style of garment where the hose, leggings, and double tunic were physically tied together with numerous cords or points. This made them very difficult to remove quickly or by force. It was, in essence, a form of medieval anti-assault wear. The specificity of your clothing choice underscores the very real and constant nature of the threat you perceive. It wasn't a general or abstract fear, it was a specific, daily reality that informed your decision. Historians who focus on gender studies have found this aspect of your trial particularly compelling, seeing it as a rare, documented case of a medieval woman using clothing as a tool of resistance against a patriarchal system that sought to control her body. The court, however, refuses to acknowledge the validity of your reasoning. They are not interested in your physical safety. They are interested in your submission. Your practical defense is irrelevant to their theological charge. In their view, your fear for your body is no excuse for endangering your soul by disobeying a divine command. They demand that you put your trust in the church in them and abandon this monstrous attire. The argument goes around and around. You hold firm. I did not take it by the counsel of any man on earth. You tell them, I took it by the command of God and his angels. By saying this, you escalate the stakes. You are now claiming that God himself commanded you to cross-dress, forcing the court into a position where they must declare that God commanded a violation of his own law. It's a bold, perhaps desperate move, but it's the only one you have. You are cornered, and you are falling back on the one authority you recognize. The debate over your trousers has reached a stalemate, but the court is what it needs. They have documented your steadfast refusal to change, and your blasphemous claim that God commanded it. This will form the central pillar of the formal charges against you. The most practical decision you ever made is about to be used as the ultimate proof of your heresy. The private interrogations are over. You have given them all the testimony you are going to give. Now, the trial enters a new, more academic phase. Caution and his inner circle have gathered hours of your statements. The next step is to shape this raw material into a formal, legal indictment. To do this, and to bolster the legitimacy of his verdict, Caution needs the official backing of the most prestigious academic institution in Europe, the University of Paris. At the time, the University of Paris was the undisputed center of theological thought in the Christian world. Its doctors of theology were considered the ultimate arbiters on matters of faith. However, like the Norman clergy, the university was politically compromised. Paris was under English occupation, and the university was firmly in the Anglo-Burgundian camp. Its scholars had a vested interest in supporting the English claim to the throne and, therefore, in finding you guilty. Caution wasn't sending his evidence to a neutral body for an objective opinion. He was sending it to a friendly institution for a rubber stamp. The prosecutor, Jean d'Estivet, is given the task of preparing the document to be sent to Paris. This is a critical moment of legal manipulation. He takes the full transcripts of your interrogations, transcripts that, despite the hostile questioning, showed your wit, piety, and consistency, and begins a process of editing. He cherry-picks your words, removes your clever deflections, and strips your answers of their context. For example, your brilliant, theologically sound reply about being in a state of grace. If I am not, may God put me there, and if I am, may God so keep me, is omitted entirely from the summary he prepares. Your practical reasons for wearing men's clothes are downplayed, while your claim that God commanded it is emphasized as a central blasphemy. The result is a document that is a grotesque caricature of your actual testimony. D'Estivet transforms you from a complex, articulate, and defiant young woman into a one-dimensional character, a proud, blasphemous, and schismatic witch. This heavily edited summary is then presented to the remaining assessors in Rouen for their formal approval before being dispatched to Paris. Here, a small but significant act of resistance occurs. A few of the assessors, most notably a Dominican friar named Dissembrad de la Pierre, protest. They complain that the summary is not a fair or accurate representation of what was said in the trial. Dissembrad, who had shown subtle signs of sympathy for you throughout the proceedings, argues that your exculpatory statements, the answers that showed you in a good light, have been systematically removed. He is angrily silenced by Caution and d'Estivet. Another assessor, a man named Jean de Lafontaine, who had conducted some of the questioning, is so disgusted by the process that he flees Rouen and is never seen at the trial again. This is a fascinating detail that is often lost. Not everyone was on board. There were cracks of conscience in the prosecutorial machine, but they were quickly plastered over. The doctored summary is sent to the Faculty of Theology and the Faculty of Canon Law at the University of Paris. The experts there review the document not as a question to be investigated, but as a conclusion to be affirmed. Weeks later, their official opinion or consultation arrives back in ruin. It is exactly what Caution was hoping for. The university's verdict is damning and absolute. They declare that your visions and revelations are either pernicious lies or come from evil and diabolical spirits. They condemn your wearing of male attire as a violation of divine law and a scandal to all decency. They find you guilty of presumption for claiming to know you would go to paradise. They label you a schismatic for your refusal to submit unconditionally to the church militanti. Boy, the court. The language is brutal and unequivocal. Seditious, cruel, blasphemous in God, scandalous, and daring in the faith. The arrival of the Paris consultation is a major turning point. Caution now has the academic firepower he needs. He is no longer just a single bishop with a political agenda. He is backed by the most respected theological authority in Christendom. The verdict from Paris provides the legal and intellectual foundation for the next stage of the trial. The focus shifts from investigation to formal accusation. The trial is effectively over. All that remains is the sentencing and the final, public performance of condemnation. The expert opinion has sealed your fate, a judgment based not on your actual words, but on a deliberately falsified summary. It's a chilling example of how academic authority can be weaponized for political ends, a process of intellectual laundering that turns lies into official truth. Armed with the damning opinion from the University of Paris, Caution moves to the next phase of his legal process. The goal is no longer to interrogate you, but to formally charge you. Jean d'Estivet, the prosecutor who so skillfully doctored the summary for Paris, is now tasked with drafting the official articles of accusation. He takes the university's conclusions and uses them as a framework to construct a list of 12 formal charges. These 12 articles are the prosecution's final case, the legal document upon which your condemnation will rest. This document is a masterpiece of propaganda and misrepresentation. It is the culmination of all the distortions, decontextualities, and twisted logic that have characterized the trial from the beginning. Each of the 12 articles isolates a specific aspect of your testimony and frames it in the most sinister light possible. The articles are read to you in your cell. As you listen, you must feel as if you are hearing a description of a complete stranger. Article 1 attacks your visions, declaring them to be feigned, lying, and seductive, proceeding from evil and diabolical spirits. It ignores all the pious details you provided and focuses only on the elements the court deemed suspect. Article 2 condemns your sign to the king, calling it presumptuous, pernicious, and a fraudulent invention designed to mislead a Christian prince. Your steadfast loyalty is presented as proof of your deceit. Article 3 attacks your belief in the holiness of your saints, Catherine and Margaret, suggesting you have engaged in a form of idolatry, venerating them in a way that is contrary to the Christian religion. Article 4 focuses on your presumption in predicting the future, such as your Falkenwald of your capture. They frame your premonitions not as divine insight, but as a form of illicit fortune-telling. Article 5 is the big one, your male clothing. It is described in lavishly condemnatory terms as contrary to divine law, a thing abominable to God, and forbidden by every law. It accuses you of blasphemy for claiming God commanded it. Article 6 covers your letters to the English in which you demanded they leave France. These letters, which you dictated, were signed J. Jesus Maria. The court twists this, accusing you of blaspheming the names of God and his saints and of being cruel and bloodthirsty for inciting war. The articles continue in this vein, each one building on the last. They condemn your attempt to escape from the castle of Beaurevoir by jumping from a tower as a sin of despair tending to suicide. They twist your refusal to submit to the court as a declaration of schism, a rejection of the authority of the entire church. The final article is a catch-all, summarizing you as a sorceress, diviner, false prophet, blasphemer, heretic, and schismatic. A little-known but crucial aspect of this process is that you were never given a proper chance to respond to the final, polished form of these 12 articles. They were read to you, yes, but the official record was constructed in a way that made it seem as if your earlier testimony was a direct answer to these charges, which is a chronological impossibility. The charges were written after the interrogations, based on a twisted version of what you said. It's like being accused of a crime, and then having your casual conversations from weeks earlier presented as your official and only defense. The academic debate here revolves around the sheer legal audacity of this maneuver. Was this standard inquisitorial practice, or was caution pushing the boundaries of even the loose legal standards of the time? Most scholars agree it was the latter. This was a show trial, and the normal rules of evidence and procedure were secondary to the desired outcome. As the articles are read, you protest. You try to correct the record. I hold to what I have said in the trial, you repeat, insisting they refer back to your actual, full testimony as recorded by the notaries Manchon and Coles, not to D.S.D. Vet's poisonous summary. You try to reintroduce the context they have so carefully stripped away, but your protests are ignored. They are noted in the margin of the record, almost as an afterthought, but they do not change the substance of the charges. The 12 articles are the legal instrument of your death sentence. They have taken the living, breathing complexity of your faith and your experience and flattened it into a neat, tidy, and utterly false list of heresies. The trial is no longer about what you did or said. It's about what the 12 articles say you didn't say. You are now fighting not against men, but against a document that has taken on a life of its own, a powerful fiction that is about to become your official reality. The trap has been sprung. All that's left is for the executioner to do his work. The legal case is closed. The 12 articles have been written, and the verdict from Paris has been received. But caution and the English are not quite finished with you. A conviction on paper is one thing, but a public confession, a breakdown would be so much more powerful. They need to break your spirit to extract a confession that will validate their entire process. Having failed to outwit you with theology and law, they now resort to a more primal form of persuasion, fear. On the morning of May 9th, you are taken from your cell. You are not led to the familiar chamber where the interrogations took place. Instead, you are escorted down a dark, damp set of stairs into the bowels of the castle. The air grows cold and stale, smelling of earth and old stone. You enter a large, gloomy chamber with a vaulted stone ceiling. The room is filled with shadows, but in the flickering torchlight, you can make out the shapes of various instruments. There is a rack, a strap pardue, and an assortment of iron tools designed for a single, brutal purpose. You are in the castle's torture chamber. Waiting for you in this grim place are Caution, the Vice Inquisitor, and a select group of assessors. Also present is the town executioner, a man whose trade is pain. The intent is clear and unambiguous. This is not an interrogation, it is a threat. Caution speaks to you, his voice echoing slightly in the stone room. He explains that you have been found guilty of many grievous errors and crimes by the learned doctors of the university. He says that many other prisoners for far less have been subjected to torment to bring them back to the path of truth. He urges you, for the good of your soul and to save your body from great suffering, to confess your sins and recant your testimony. You see the instruments of torture, he says, gesturing around the room. If you do not confess, you will be put to them. This is the moment of ultimate psychological pressure. They are confronting you with the physical reality of what they can do to your body. The threat is no longer abstract legal language or theological debate. It is wood, rope, and iron. It is the promise of unimaginable pain. You look at the instruments. You look at the impassive face of the executioner. You look at the expectant faces of your judges. Your heart is surely hammering in your chest, the cold of the dungeon seeping into your bones. But your voice, when you speak, is steady. Truly, you say, if you were to tear me limb from limb and separate my soul from my body, I would not tell you anything different. And if I did say anything else, I would afterwards declare that you had compelled me to say it by force. This is, without a doubt, one of the most courageous statements in history. In a single sentence, you completely disarm their threat. You tell them that even if they torture you into a false confession, you will immediately recant it, robbing them of the victory they seek. You expose the futility of their tactic. A forced confession is worthless, and you have just announced to them that any confession they get will be, by definition, forced. Your answer throws the assembled clerics into disarray. They huddle together, whispering amongst themselves. A debate breaks out right there in the torture chamber. Some of the hardliners, likely including the vet, argue for proceeding with the torture regardless. They believe pain will break you. Others, however, are more cautious. They see the strength of your will and realize that torturing you might be counterproductive. It could make you a sympathetic martyr, and as you've just pointed out, any confession would be tainted. A little-known fact is that a formal vote was taken among the assessors present. The result was a split decision. The majority voted against using torture. What were their reasons? Was it a flicker of compassion? Unlikely. The historical consensus is that it was a purely pragmatic decision. They concluded that your hardness of heart was so great that torture would likely be ineffective, and the political fallout was not worth the risk. They believed they already had more than enough evidence to burn you for heresy without needing a physically coerced confession. Caution, seeing the division and likely agreeing with the pragmatic view, formally concludes the session. The threat has failed. You are led out of the torture chamber and back to the relative light of your cell. You have faced down their ultimate weapon and have not flinched. You have won the battle of wills, but it is a hollow victory. They may have decided not to torture your body, but they have no intention of sparing your life. The show of force was just one more step in a carefully choreographed dance of death. They have demonstrated for the record that they charitably offered you a chance to avoid pain, and you, in your stubbornness, refused. It's another box ticked on their legal checklist, another justification for the fire that they are already preparing. Having failed to break you with private threats, Caution moves on to his next strategy, public humiliation. He decides to stage a grand piece of theater designed to pressure you into submission in front of the entire city. On May 24th, you are woken early. You are not taken to a courtroom or a chamber, but placed in a cart and driven out of the castle. The destination is the cemetery of the Abbey of St. Waun, a large, open space in the heart of ruin. Two large, raised platforms or scaffolds have been erected in the cemetery, surrounded by the silent stone faces of old graves. One platform is for you, your judges, and the various ecclesiastical dignitaries. The other is for the secular authorities and notable English lords, including the powerful Cardinal of Winchester, a high-ranking English prelate. A massive crowd has been assembled. Soldiers, townsfolk, clergy. It seems the whole of Rouen is there to witness the spectacle. In the center of the square, a preacher's pulpit has been set up. You are led onto the scaffold and made to stand before this immense crowd. You are the focal point of 1,000 hostile or curious stares. The air is tense with anticipation. This is a carefully orchestrated psychological assault. They have brought you to a graveyard, a place of death, to confront you with your own mortality. The presence of the English lords is a stark reminder of the political power that underpins this entire religious proceeding. The event begins with a long, fiery sermon delivered by one of the university doctors, a man named Guillaume. His sermon is a direct attack on you and, by extension, on the king you serve. He points a finger at you, his voice booming across the square, and calls you a heretic, a liar, a sorceress. He turns to the political implications, denouncing your king, Charles VII, as a heretic for having followed the counsel of a witch. "Ah, France, you have been much abused," he cries. "You have always been the most Christian house, and Charles, who calls himself your king and governor, has adhered, like a heretic and schismatic, to the words and deeds of a worthless woman, defamed and full of dishonor. You cannot let this stand. You are willing to endure personal insults, but not the slander of your king." You interrupt the sermon, a shocking breach of decorum. "By my faith, sir, with all due respect," you call out, "I dare say and swear on pain of my life, that he is the noblest Christian of all Christians, and the one who best loves the faith and the church." Your outburst causes a stir, but Herod continues undeterred. He concludes his sermon and then turns to you, presenting you with a formal document of abrogation, a confession and a promise to renounce your sins. He demands that you sign it. "Ajber, or you will be burned," he says, the choice laid bare in its brutal simplicity. This is the climax of the ceremony. The executioner is present with his card, ready to take you directly to the marketplace where the steak is waiting, should you refuse. The pressure is immense. The crowd is watching. The threat of immediate, fiery death is palpable. You hesitate. You ask for the document to be read aloud and explained to you. You say you will defer to the judgment of the church, but you are confused and exhausted. What happens next is one of the most disputed and murky events of the entire trial. The official transcript states that you consented and that the abrogation document was read to you before you signed it. However, eyewitnesses from the later retrial tell a very different story. They claim that the crowd was becoming restless, that some of the English soldiers were growing impatient and angry, even throwing stones. They say that in the confusion, a much shorter, simpler document was substituted for the long, formal one. This shorter version, they claimed, was a simple promise to no longer bear arms or wear men's clothing. Whether it was the long version or the short one, you, being illiterate, could not read it. You were being asked to consent to something you could not verify. In the chaos and under extreme duress with the threat of the fire looming, you falter. An English cleric reportedly takes your hand and guides it to make a mark on the parchment, across a circle, the common signature of the illiterate. Caution. Immediately seizes upon this. He holds up the document. He has his public confession. He announces that, out of mercy, the church will spare your life. You will not be burned. Instead, you are sentenced to a life of perpetual imprisonment, on the bread of sorrow and the water of affliction, to repent for your sins. The English lords are furious. They feel cheated. They wanted a dead witch, not a live prisoner. The king is ill, sir. One of them shouts at caution. But the bishop has played his hand perfectly. He has publicly discredited you, secured a confession, and maintained the appearance of ecclesiastical mercy. You are led away from the cemetery, not to the church prison you were promised, but back to the same secular castle, back to the same English guards. The public humiliation is complete. You have bent the knee, or so it seems, that the story is far from over. Your momentary submission in the graveyard at St. Wound has set the stage for the final, and most cynical, act of the entire drama. Back in the cold reality of your cell in Bewildering Castle, the brief, chaotic scene in the cemetery feels like a bewildering dream. The roar of the crowd is gone, replaced by the familiar silence of stone walls and the clank of your chains. You have just publicly abjured. You made a mark on a piece of parchment you cowed and read, under the direct threat of being burned alive. In the eyes of the court and the public, you have confessed. You are no longer Joan the Maid, a vessel of God's will. You are a convicted heretic who has admitted her errors. The document you signed, or rather made a mark on, is a subject of intense historical controversy. The official trial record contains a long, detailed confession. It's a lengthy text in which Jehan Mi, called the maid, admits to being a liar, a diviner, and a blasphemer. She confesses that her visions were false, her clothing an abomination, and her letters cruel. She promises to return to the unity of the church, to never again carry arms and, crucially, to wear female clothing, without ever taking up male attire again. This is the version caution needed for his records, the version that justified his entire process. However, the testimony from your rehabilitation trial 25 years later paints a very different picture. Multiple eyewitnesses, including the notary Guillaume Manchon and the friar Sembrot de la Pierre, swore under oath that the document you actually signed was a much shorter, different text. They described it as being only a few lines long, a simple promise to obey the church and stop wearing men's clothes and carrying weapons. This theory suggests a classic bait and switch. They panicked you with the threat of fire, then had you sign a short, relatively innocuous document in the ensuing chaos, only to later substitute a much more damning, pre-written confession into the official record. Historians are still divided on which version of events is true. Was there a substitution? Or did the witnesses at the retrial, seeking to distance themselves from the original verdict, misremember or deliberately alter their accounts? The truth is likely lost to time, buried under layers of political maneuvering and conflicting testimony. But what is certain is that you, in that moment, believed you were making a simple promise to save your life. You had no idea of the comprehensive confession that would be entered into the record under your name. Your judges see your abrogation as a total victory. Caution can now present himself as both a firm judge who rooted out heresy and a merciful shepherd who brought a lost sheep back into the fold. He has satisfied the theological requirements of the Inquisition while simultaneously discrediting the spiritual foundation of Charles Pi's crown. The English, though initially angry at being denied an execution, are mollified by the political win. A live-confessed heretic in their prison is a powerful propaganda tool. For you, the immediate consequences a profound sense of defeat and confusion. The voices of your saints, which had been your constant companions, now seem to scold you. You later testify that Saint Catherine and Saint Margaret spoke to you that evening, expressing their deep sorrow and anger at what you had done. They told me that I had done a great evil in ABJU ring. You would say that I had damned myself to save my life. The guilt is a heavy weight, perhaps even heavier than the chains on your ankles. You have betrayed your God, your mission, and yourself, all for a life of perpetual imprisonment in the hands of your enemies. The choice you made in the cemetery, a choice born of terror and exhaustion, now feels like a profound spiritual failure. The fire might have been a cleaner, more noble end. Instead, you are left to rot, both physically and spiritually, in the darkness of your cell. As part of your abjuration, you agreed to abandon your male attire. Following the scene at the cemetery, your judges provide you with a dress. The rough spun tunic and hose are taken away, and for the first time in years, you are clothed as a woman. Your hair, which had been kept cropped short in the style of a soldier, is now allowed to grow. The transformation is not just physical, it's a symbol of your submission. You have outwardly conformed to their demands. You are now in their eyes behaving as a proper woman should. You were promised that if you made this change, you would be moved to a church prison and guarded by women. This was a key part of the bargain, the one concession that might have guaranteed your safety and offered a small measure of dignity. But this promise, like so many others, is immediately broken. You are not moved. You remain in the same secular castle, in the same cell, under the guard of the same rough English soldiers. Nothing has changed except your clothes. The cruelty of this decision cannot be overstated. By forcing you into a dressing, then leaving you in the custody of your male tormentors, the court has stripped you of your only practical means of defense and then deliberately left you in a state of maximum vulnerability. Your deepest fears, the very ones you articulated as your reason for wearing men's clothes, have been realized by the court's actions. It is a breathtaking act of bad faith. Life in the cell becomes a new kind of hell. The English guards who already despised you now see your female attire as an invitation for mockery and abuse. The trial records and later testimonies are grimly discreet on the details, but they make it clear that you were subjected to constant harassment. The threat of sexual assault, which had been a looming fear, was now an immediate and constant reality. You are trapped, defenseless, and completely at the mercy of men who see you as their political enemy and now a vulnerable female prize. This period, which lasts only a few days, is a crucial part of the prosecution's larger plan. They have not spared your life out of mercy. They have merely changed the method of your execution. They need you to relapse. According to the rules of the Inquisition, a heretic who confesses and abjures can be sentenced to life in prison. But a heretic who relapses, who returns to their old heresies after having abjurged them, is to be handed over to the secular authorities for immediate execution, with no possibility of another confession or act of repentance. The fire is inescapable for a relapsed heretic. The entire situation seems engineered to force you to relapse. By breaking their promise of a church prison and female guards, they have created an intolerable situation for you. They have made your life as a woman in their prison a living torment. Did they know that this would drive you back to the relative safety of your old clothes? It seems almost certain. A little known but chilling detail from the retrial testimony sheds light on the English attitude. One witness, a man named Martin Ladvenu, who was one of the few friars who showed you some kindness, testified that the high-ranking English Earl of Warwick, who was overseeing your imprisonment, was heard to say, "The king has paid dearly for her, and he intends her to die." He was frustrated that you hadn't been burned at St. Woun and wanted to ensure the relapse happened quickly. This statement reveals the cold, political calculus at play. This was never about your soul. It was about securing a politically necessary execution. For a few days you endure it. You wear the dress. You suffer the abuse. You pray to your saints, who you believe are angry with you for your weakness. You are caught in an impossible situation. To continue to wear the dress is to endure unending torment and live with the shame of your recantation. To put on men's clothes again would be an open act of defiance, a deliberate step back into heresy, a certain death sentence. You are trapped between a miserable life and a certain death. The choice is agonizing. You are alone, abandoned by your king, scolded by your saints, and tormented by your jailers. The carefully constructed trap is about to spring. It happens on a Sunday morning, just 3 days after your public abrogation. The sequence of events is murky, clouded by conflicting accounts and the deliberate machinations of your captors. But the outcome is brutally clear. According to your own testimony, you woke up and asked your gods to unhang you so you could relieve yourself. They refused. An argument ensued. Then they forcibly took the dress you were wearing from you, leaving you with nothing. They threw a sack containing your old male clothes, the tunic and hose, into the cell and told you to put them on. You protested, telling them, "Sirs, you know it is forbidden to me. Without fail, I will not take it." You argued with them until noon. Finally, out of bodily necessity and with no other option, you put on the male clothes. Another version of the story, told by some witnesses at the retrial, is slightly different but leads to the same end. In this version, you were not forcibly stripped. Instead, you found your dress gone when you woke up, with only the male clothes left for you to wear. This suggests a slightly more subtle, but no less coercive, form of entrapment. Whichever version is true, the result is the same. You are once again wearing the abominable attire you had sworn to abandon. It is the single, undeniable act of relapse that your prosecutors have been waiting for. The trap was perfectly laid. Why wear your old clothes even in the cell? They should have been destroyed. Their convenient presence points to a deliberate plan. It's a classic setup. They created an intolerable situation, removed the approved option, the dress, and provided the forbidden one, the trousers, leaving you with no real choice. The historical debate isn't really about if you were set up, but about the precise mechanics of the setup. Was it a violent act by the guards, or a more cunning manipulation orchestrated from on high? Most historians lean towards the latter, believing that the guards were acting on orders from their English superiors, perhaps even from the Earl of Warwick himself, who was impatient for an execution. As soon as you are dressed in the male clothes, the guards run to alert the authorities. Clerics and officials, including caution, are summoned to the castle with suspicious speed, almost as if they were waiting for the goal. They enter your cell and find you just as they had hoped, dressed as a man. The formal interrogation that follows is a sham. It's not an inquiry, it's a confirmation. Caution asks you why you have put on these clothes again. Your reply is a mix of defiance, despair, and righteous anger. You tell them you did it of your own free will. You state that you prefer the male clothes. You then unload all the grievances of the past few days. You tell them that the promises made to you at St. Woon have not been kept. You have not been allowed to attend Mass. You have not been put in a church prison with female guards. Instead, you have been much vexed, molested, and troubled by your English jailers. I would rather die than be in irons like this, you declare. But if you will take me to a church prison, and take me out of irons, and give me a woman to be with me, I will be good and do what the church commands. It's a last, desperate attempt at negotiation, but it's too late. They are not interested in your reasons or your conditions. Then you deliver a final, damning statement. They ask you about your voices. Have you heard them again? Yes, you say. You tell them that God has expressed his great pity through St. Catherine and St. Margaret for the great treason you committed by ABJ you ring. You now formally and completely retract your confession. Everything you said and signed at the cemetery, you now declare, was done only out of fear of the fire. I did not mean to say or revoke anything except as it was God's good pleasure, you state. I only revoked because of my fear of the fire. This is it. This is everything caution needs and more. You have not only put on the forbidden clothes, you have reaffirmed your belief in your visions, and explicitly stated that your abrogation was a lie. You have, in the eyes of the law, signed your own death warrant twice over. You are, officially and irrevocably, a relapsed heretic. There is a chilling account from one of the witnesses, the Friar Unimportant de la Pierre, of what happened as Caution left your cell. The bishop encountered the Earl of Warwick in the castle courtyard. He was smiling. "Farewell, farewell," Caution said to him in a loud, cheerful voice, a phrase that in the context meant something like "it's all taken care of," or "be of good cheer." The trap had been sprung, and the architect of it was celebrating his success. There is no more deliberation. There are no more theological debates. The moment you retracted your confession and draped on your male attire, your fate was sealed. The wheels of the legal machine, which had paused for a few days, now begin to turn with terrifying speed and finality. You are a relapsed heretic, and for that, there is only one punishment. The very next day, a panel of judges is hastily convened. It's a formality. Caution presents the evidence. You were found wearing men's clothing. You admitted to doing so willingly, and you reaffirmed your belief in your demonic voices, recanting your public abjuration. The conclusion is foregone. You are officially declared a relapsed, impenitent heretic. The language of the final verdict is cold and absolute. It recounts your sins, the visions, the clothes, the letters, the defiance. It notes the mercy the court had previously shown you by accepting your confession and sparing your life. And it condemns your relapse as a return to foulness, like a dog returning to its vomit, a common and vile biblical metaphor used in heresy cases. Because you have rejected the Church's authority not once, but twice, you are now beyond its help. The sentence is read out. You are to be cast out from the Church as a rotten member, to prevent you from infecting the rest of the body of Christ. You are to be abandoned to the secular wrong. This is a crucial piece of legal and religious theater. The Church, under its own laws, could not directly sentence someone to death. The Inquisitor's role was to identify heresy. The punishment, the actual execution, was to be carried out by the civil authorities, in this case, the English occupation government in ruin. This allowed the Church to maintain the fiction that it did not shed blood. It was a semantic shield that allowed men like Caution to order an execution while claiming their hands were clean. You are informed of the decision. There will be no more appeals, no more chances to speak. The time for words is over. The only thing left is the fire. There is a strange and controversial detail about this final judgment. A small handful of the clerical assessors, men like Jean de Mailly, the Bishop of Avranches, and the Friar Unimportant de la Pierre, seem to have had a last-minute crisis of conscience. While they agreed you were a relapsed heretic, they argued that, according to procedure, the articles of your relapse should be formally read and explained to you before the final sentence was passed. It was a small, procedural point, a request from a hearing. Caution, in his haste and certainty, dismisses their concerns out of hand. He will not grant you even this one, final procedural courtesy. The English are clamoring for a conclusion, and he is determined to give it to them without any further delay. The academic debate here is whether this procedural shortcut legally invalidated the final sentence. For the later rehabilitation trial, it was a key piece of evidence showing that Caution had violated the proper forms of inquisitorial law. For you in your cell, the legal arguments are meaningless. All you know is that you are going to die. The terror you felt in the cemetery at St. Juan, the fear that made you sign the abjuration, returns. This time, there is no escape. You will face the fire. Your reaction is one of pure human anguish. According to the notary Manchon, when you heard the final sentence, you broke down. You cried out, tearing at your hair. Alas, am I to be so horribly and cruelly treated? You wept. Alas, that my body, clean and whole, which has never been corrupted, should this day be consumed and reduced to ashes. I would rather be beheaded 7 times over than to be burned. Your outburst is a raw expression of your terror of the flames, a death of unimaginable agony. It is also a poignant defense of your own physical integrity, your virginity, which had been a core part of your identity as the maid. You also cry out against the injustice done to you by the very men who were supposed to be your spiritual guides. I appeal to God, the great judge, against the great wrongs and grievances they are doing me. In this moment of ultimate despair, you are not the stoic saint of the stained glass windows. You are a terrified 19-year-old girl betrayed and condemned, facing a horrific death. Your faith in your voices remains, but your faith in the earthly church has been utterly shattered. You have been caught in a political and religious trap, and the deadly, unpitying, overwhelming jaws of it, as one historian later wrote, are now closing for the last time. The morning of May 30th, 1431, dawns gray and cold. This is the last morning of your life. In a final, paradoxical act of religious observance, caution decides that you should be allowed to receive Holy Communion, the Eucharist, a sacrament you have been denied throughout your long imprisonment. A priest, Martin Ladvenu, one of the few who has shown you a glimmer of kindness, is sent to your cell to hear your final confession and administer the rite. This act is steeped in a bitter irony that has been debated by theologians for centuries. On one hand, the Church has just formally excommunicated you, casting you out as a rotten member. An excommunicated person is, by definition, forbidden from receiving the sacraments. On the other hand, denying a last communion to a condemned person was seen as an act of profound cruelty, potentially damning their soul for eternity. Caution, ever the legalist, is caught between the rules of excommunication and the pastoral traditions surrounding death. He opts for a compromise that is both compassionate and deeply contradictory. When Ladvenu arrives with the consecrated host, it is carried not with the usual reverence in a cebo room with candles and a bell, but brought in unceremoniously, wrapped in a linen cloth. This is a subtle but significant detail. It's a lesser form of the sacrament befitting in their minds your status as a condemned heretic. You are being granted a final grace, but it is a grace tainted by your perceived unworthy ends. Your reaction upon seeing the host is one of profound emotion. You have longed for this sacrament. You get down on your knees weeping. For you, this is a final chance to connect with the God you have served, a moment of pure, unmitigated faith that transcends the corrupt church of men that has condemned you. You make your confession to Ladvenu. You reaffirm your belief that your voices were from God and that you have been unjustly condemned. You forgive your accusers. You ask to be buried in holy ground, a request that you know will be denied, as the ashes of heretics were to be scattered to prevent the veneration of their remains. The scene in your cell is intensely moving. You, the condemned heretic, are receiving the body of Christ from a priest of the very institution that is about to burn you. This moment encapsulates the central tragedy of your story, your deep, orthodox Catholic faith clashing with the politicized, institutional power of the Church. You are being killed not for a lack of faith, but for a form of faith that was too personal to direct and too inconvenient for the men in power. A little known but poignant detail from this final morning concerns the cross. You ask for a cross to look upon as you die. An English soldier standing nearby, perhaps moved by the scene, takes 2 small pieces of wood from a broken staff or stick and quickly fashions a small, rough cross for you. He gives it to you and you kiss it weeping and place it inside your tunic next to your heart. It's a small, unexpected act of human kindness from one of your enemies, a flicker of light in the overwhelming darkness. You also ask for a formal processional cross to be brought from a nearby church, so that you can gaze upon it while you are on the pyre. Isenbald de la Pierre, the friar who had tried to stand up for you before, promises to do this. You will run to the church and bring its cross to the place of execution, holding it up high so you can see it until the very end. This final morning is a strange mixture of piety and bureaucratic cruelty. While you are being granted these last religious rites, the secular authorities are preparing the physical means of your death. The cart is being readied. The executioner is checking his supplies. The wood is being piled high in the old market square of ruin. The city is preparing for a public holiday, a day of spectacle and grim entertainment. For the Church, it is the solemn casting out of a heretic. For the English, it is the final, public stamping out of a symbol of French resistance. For you, it is simply the end. You have made your peace with God. Now you must face the fire. The door to your cell opens for the last time. The time for prayer and sacraments is over. The reality of the execution is at hand. You are led out into the courtyard of the castle. A long, cone-shaped hat is placed on your head. It's a mitre of infamy, the traditional headwear for a condemned heretic. On it are painted images of devils and flames, along with the damning words heretic relapsed, apostate, idolater. It is the final, public branding, a costume designed to strip you of all dignity and present you to the world as a creature of evil. You are placed in the executioner's cart. It's a simple, two-wheeled wooden cart, open to the elements in the eyes of the crowd. You are not alone in the cart. With you are the two friars who have shown you some small measure of compassion, Martin Ladvino and Decembrade de la Pierre. Their presence is a small comfort, a final human connection in these last moments. The cart lurches forward, and the slow procession through the streets of ruin begins. The journey to the Ville Marche, the old market square, is not long, but it must feel like an eternity. The streets are packed with people. A crowd of thousands has turned out for the spectacle. The English have ordered a massive military presence. As many as 800 soldiers line the route, their pikes and swords glinting in the pale morning light. They are there to control the crowd and to ensure there are no last-minute attempts at rescue or riot. As you pass through the narrow streets, you are bombarded by a cacophony of sound. The jeers and curses of English soldiers and their sympathizers, the fearful whispers of the French townspeople, the tolling of a church bell marking the hour of your death. You see a sea of faces, a blur of expressions, hatred, morbid curiosity, pity, fear. You are the center of a city-wide spectacle, a public ritual of state-sponsored death. You remain composed, praying aloud, your voice is steady, quiet counterpoint to the noise of the crowd. You call upon your saints Michael, Catherine, Margaret. You do not recant. You do not scream or curse your fate. Your focus is inward on your final communion with God. Your quiet dignity in the face of this public humiliation is perhaps your final act of defiance. The cart finally rumbles into the old market square. The space is dominated by the sight that has haunted your waking and sleeping thoughts, the pyre. It's a massive construction. A high platform made of plaster has been built, and on top of it, a huge pile of wood is stacked around a thick, upright stake. The height of the platform is a deliberate, cruel detail. It ensures that everyone in the square can see you clearly. It also ensures that the executioner cannot easily reach you to strangle you and grant you a mercifully quick death before the flames take hold, a common practice at the time. You are intended to burn slowly, visibly. You are taken from the cart and lead up the steps to the platform. There, the final sentence is read aloud once more for the benefit of the crowd. It is a long, formal declaration of your crimes, read by one of Cochinès officials. You stand and listen, the paper mitre on your head, the rough wooden cross clutched in your hand. When the reading is finished, you are given one last chance to speak to the people. You use it not to protest your innocence or curse your judges, but to ask for forgiveness. You ask the people of Rouen, even the English soldiers, to pray for you. You forgive your accusers for the wrong they have done you. Your speech is so filled with piety and simple faith that it has a profound effect on the crowd. The mood shifts. The jeering subsides. Many in the crowd, including some of the hardened English soldiers and even the official scribes, begin to weep openly. Caution himself is seen to be crying. Was it remorse, or the crocodile tears of a man admiring the success of his own tragic play? Historians still debate the sincerity of his tears. Your final words have transformed the mood from a gleeful execution to a somber, tragic event. The English commanders grow impatient. Priest, do you want us to dine here? One of them shouts, urging them to get on with it. You are seized by the executioner and his assistants. They tie you to the stake with ropes and chains. The mitre is on your head. The small hand-made cross is inside your tunic. You ask Decembrade de la Pierre to hold the church's cross up high so you can see it. The executioner, a man named Geoffroy the Rage, descends the platform. He takes a torch. The moment has arrived. The executioner touches the torch to the kindling at the base of the pyre. The dry wood catches quickly. A wisp of smoke, then a flicker of orange, then a hungry crackle as the flames begin to climb. The heat begins to rise, a wave of warmth that quickly becomes a blistering inferno. You are high above the crowd, alone at the stake. Friar Decembrade de la Pierre stands at the edge of the platform, holding the processional cross aloft as he promised. Your last connection to a world that is rapidly dissolving into fire and smoke. The smoke billows up first, thick and acrid, choking you, making your eyes strain. Through the haze, you keep your gaze fixed on the cross. You cry out, your voice piercing the stunned silence of the crowd. Jesus, The flames lick at the base of the platform, then leap higher, engulfing the woodpile. The heat is searing. The crowd watches, in a state of horrified awe. They see the small figure tied to the stake, see the flames consuming the platform, hear your cries. The spectacle they came for has become an almost unbearable reality. Your final moments are a matter of legend, pieced together from the accounts of shaken eyewitnesses. They say you continued to call out the name of Jesus, your voice strong and clear even as the fire roared around you. You shouted the names of your saints. You did not scream in pain or terror, but in faith. Your last audible word, shouted with all the strength left in your lungs as the flames finally engulfed you, was Jesus. Then, silence. The only sound is the roaring crackle of the fire. The English are determined that no relics of the witch should remain. They want to prevent anyone from gathering your bones or ashes to be venerated as holy relics. The commander orders the fire to be raked back after it has died down a little, to expose your charred body to the crowd, to prove that you were indeed a woman and that you were well and truly dead. Then, they order the fire to be stoked again to an even greater intensity, to reduce everything, even the bones, to fine ash. The executioner Geoffroy the Rage later confessed that he was deeply troubled by the execution. He was particularly horrified to find your heart, intact and unburned amongst the ashes, a detail that, for believers, was a clear sign of divine protection and sanctity. Whether this is a historical fact or a later embellishment to the legend is impossible to know, but the Rage reportedly felt a great terror that he had burned a saint. When the fire has finally done its work, the executioner gathers up all that is left of you, a small pile of gray, ashen, blackened bone fragments. Following his orders, he takes these remains and casts them from a bridge into the river Seine. The river flows out to the English Channel and from there to the ocean. It is a final, symbolic act of erasure. They have not just killed you, they have attempted to wipe every physical trace of your existence from the earth. But they fail. You cannot burn a story. You cannot drown a legend. The moment the flames consumed your body, your second life began. The story of the young girl burned by the English for her faith and loyalty spread like wildfire. The immediate effect was a surge in French morale. The soldier they had killed became a martyr who inspired them. Politically, your death, intended to delegitimize Charles VII, ultimately had the opposite effect. It painted the English as cruel and unjust persecutors of a holy maid, further galvanizing French resistance against them. The very men who condemned you began to feel the weight of what they had done. Cochonet's career, which he had hoped to advance, stalled. He got his archbishopric of Rouen, but he was forever tainted by the trial. The memory of your final, prayerful moments on the pyre haunted those who witnessed it. The legend began to grow, passed in whispers and stories around hearths and in taverns. The girl they tried to erase from history was already becoming an immortal part of it. The ashes cast into the Seine did not signify an end, but a dispersal. Your story was now everywhere. Time passes. The world changes. The 100 Years' War, the brutal conflict that defined your life, finally sputters to an end. The English are driven out of France, their continental ambitions shattered. The king you crowned, Charles VII, sits securely on the throne of a reunified and recovering kingdom. The France that you prophesied, a France free from English rule, has come to pass. But a shadow still hangs over the victory. The memory of the Maid of Orleans, condemned and burned as a heretic by a court acting in the name of the French Church, albeit a politically compromised one. By the 1452s, a full 2 decades after your death, the political climate has completely reversed. Charles VII, now known as Charles the Victorious, finds it politically embarrassing that the spiritual catalyst for his coronation was officially a condemned heretic. The time is ripe for a re-examination. In 1450, Charles VII orders an initial inquiry into the conduct of the original trial. Finally, in 1455, Pope Calixtus II authorizes a full appellate trial, a nullification or rehabilitation trial, to investigate the errors and abuses of the 1431 verdict. A new court is assembled. This time the judges are loyal to the French crown and the papacy in Rome. The location is not the enemy stronghold of Rouen, but the liberated cities of Paris and Rouen itself, now back in French hands. The goal is the complete opposite of the first trial, not to condemn, but to exonerate. What follows is a remarkable historical event. The court summons and interviews everyone they can find who was involved in the original trial and is still alive. One by one, the men who judged you, questioned you, and guarded you are called to testify under oath. It is a mass unburdening of conscience. The notaries, Manchon and Coles, bring forth their meticulously kept records, testifying to the accuracy of the transcript and the hostile conditions of the trial. Friars like Isambrod de la Pierre and Martin Ladvenu recount your piety, your cleverness, and the cynical traps laid for you. Townsfolk from Dom Remy are brought in to testify to your good character and devout upbringing. Soldiers who served with you speak of your courage and leadership. It is through the records of this second trial that we know so much about the first. The witnesses, now free from English pressure, reveal the story behind the story, the spies in your cell, the threat of torture, the doctored articles, the substituted abrogation, the setup that led to your relapse. They paint a damning portrait of Pierre Cauchon, who by this time was long dead, as a man driven by political ambition and personal animosity. He, along with the now deceased prosecutor d'Estivet, becomes the chief villain of this new narrative. One of the most fascinating aspects of the retrial is the legal gymnastics involved. The court could not directly challenge the authority of the University of Paris or the sanctity of an inquisitorial proceeding. Instead, they focused on procedural errors. They argued that the original court lacked proper jurisdiction, that the judges were biased, that you were denied legal counsel, that the rules of evidence were violated, and that the final sentence was passed without proper formalities. They picked the first trial apart, not on the substance of your faith, but on the technicalities of the law. It was a legalistic undoing of a legalistic crime. On July 7, 1456, in the great hall of the Archbishop's palace in ruin, the very city where you were burned, the final verdict of the rehabilitation trial is read. The court declares the original trial of 1431 to have been full of corruption, cozenage, fraud, and malice. The 12 articles of accusation are officially nullified. Your condemnation is overturned. Your name is cleared. You are declared innocent, a true Catholic, and a martyr for your faith and your country. Your elderly mother is there to hear the word. The long struggle is over. Your legal innocence is established, but it is a hollow victory in human terms. It cannot bring you back. It cannot erase the suffering. Yet, it is a crucial turning point. The narrative is now officially corrected. The state and the church now agree. You are not a witch. You are a hero. The path is now clear for your final transformation, a journey that will take centuries from cleared name to official sainthood, from the ashes of the old market square to the altars of the world. The trial is over. The verdict is in. And this time, it is in your favor. And so, the story ends. Or rather, one story ends and another begins. The girl from Dom Remy, the soldier, the prisoner, the heretic, the martyr. She has now become a symbol, an idea, something that can no longer be contained by a single life or a single narrative. Her journey through the labyrinth of human justice and faith is complete. She has been tested by the greatest legal and theological minds of her time. And in the long run, she has been vindicated. The fire in the old market square could only consume her body. It could not touch the truth of her conviction, nor the power of her story. And that story, like the gentle smoke rising from a snuffed-out candle, drifted out into the world, where it has captured the imagination of poets, playwrights, soldiers, and saints for centuries. It's a quiet reminder that even in the darkest of rooms, and the most hopeless of trials, a single, unwavering voice can sometimes be enough to echo through all of history. Now, let the soft hum of the fan be the only sound you hear. Let the weight of the day drift away like ashes on the river. The courtroom is empty. The judges have gone home, and all is quiet. The world can wait until morning. It's time to let go. It's time to sleep.